I have translated for warlords, for senators, for men who moved money in amounts that required new vocabulary. I have sat in rooms where the wrong word would have cost someone their freedom, their fortune, or, twice, early in my career, possibly their life. I have never once lost my composure. But then, none of those men had looked at me the way Jaehwi Lee looked at me when the room finally emptied. Like he had been waiting 7 weeks for everyone else to leave. The light in the Shilla Seoul did not behave like ordinary light. It came through the tall, draped panels of sheer linen, warm and diffuse, and spread itself across the room like something that had given up moving. 3 hours. I had been sitting in this particular quality of stillness for 3 hours, my spine rigid against the gray upholstered sofa, my microphone gripped in both hands the way a diver grips the edge of a board before she is no longer certain she wants to jump. Around the oval conference table, the Americans were wrapping up. Or rather, they were doing what Americans do when they want to appear to be wrapping up. They were talking louder and slower, as though volume were a currency I hadn't yet learned to spend. I know their type. I have spent 6 years translating corporate aggression into diplomatic possibility. I understand that condescension is its own dialect, and I have become fluent in it without ever wanting to be. I have translated far worse rooms than this one. What I have not translated is him. Jaehwi Lee sits at the head of the table to my left, perfectly still in his dark charcoal suit, one hand resting flat against the polished mahogany surface, the other curled loosely around a glass of water he has not once raised to his lips. The collar of his shirt is open by a single button, just enough to suggest he has made one concession to the heat of the room, one small surrender, nothing more. At the edge of that open collar, the dark coil of ink begins its climb up his neck, intricate, deliberate, a language I have been trying not to read for weeks. When a lead American, a thick-necked man from Houston with a handshake that announces itself, makes his third thinly veiled reference to Jaehwi's unconventional background, I feel rather than hear the shift in the room. A pressure change. Something molecular. Jaehwi speaks 4 words in Korean. I translate them as, "We remain open to reconsidering the timeline." What he actually says would have ended the deal, emptied the room, and potentially the career of everyone present. That is my job. I translate his world into something the world can survive. I have been doing it for 7 weeks without once asking myself what it is costing me. The Americans stand. Handshakes. Pleasantries assembled like furniture from the wrong box. The heavy oak doors at the suite's entrance swing open, swallow them whole, and click shut. The silence that follows is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of everything neither of us has said.
I have been counting. 7 weeks, 4 days, and approximately, though I do not permit myself to be approximate about much, somewhere between too many hours and not enough. That is how long George Simon has been sitting 3 feet to my left, turning my words into weapons that will not wound, my silences into something palatable, my empire into something men in expensive shoes are willing to trust. She is extraordinary at it. I knew she would be. I chose her because of a voice on a borrowed audio guide in a palace I visit once a year to remember who I was before I became who I am. She was narrating the history of a place I grew up beside without ever truly seeing, and something in the cadence of her English, patient, unguarded, genuinely moved, stopped me in the middle of a courtyard with my bodyguards waiting at a respectful distance and made me feel, for the first time in longer than I care to acknowledge, that I was being spoken to rather than managed. I found her. I hired her. I told myself it was strategic. I did not anticipate that she would look at me the way she does during negotiations, not at my face, but slightly past it, as though she is listening to something underneath the words, some frequency of meaning I have never once broadcast deliberately. As though she can hear the weight of what I leave unspoken. Nobody hears that. I have spent 34 years ensuring nobody hears that. The Americans leave. The door closes. I do not move. I am watching her hands on the microphone, still recording, still working, still refusing to put the instrument down, and I understand, with the particular clarity of a man who has spent his life reading rooms, that she is one breath away from something irreversible. I wait. I have always been a patient man. My patience is legendary, in certain circles, for all the wrong reasons. This is different. This patience is not strategy. This is hope dressed in a suit.
I should have clicked the microphone off. Protocol requires it. The negotiation is over. The recording has served its purpose. My contract specifies that all audio capture cease upon the departure of third parties. I know the clause. I annealed it. I do not click it off. Instead, I sit in the ringing silence of the suite and look down at the small silver body of the microphone in my hands, and feel, with a clarity I usually spend considerable energy avoiding, the full accumulated weight of 7 weeks. The weight of translating his commands and leaving out his rage. The weight of his voice at close range, low and measured, Korean folding into my ear like something that needs to be kept safe. The weight of the way he occasionally glances at me, not for confirmation, not for approval, but with something more unsettling, recognition. The weight of a feeling I have no professional word for. I do not make speeches. I do not make confessions. I am the woman at the edge of the room, fluent in the language of other people's lives, a ghost with excellent diction. But the room is empty now except for him. And my throat is full of something that has been waiting 7 weeks for the door to close. My voice comes out quieter than I intend. Rougher. I can translate your contracts. Your threats. Your demands. I can smooth out every sharp edge you put into the world and hand it back to people in a shape they'll accept. I pause. I am still looking at the microphone. But this? I glance up. His eyes are already on me, have been, I suspect, for longer than I realized. Can this love be translated? The word lands like a stone in still water. I did not mean to say love. I mean it entirely.
I do not call my security. I do not answer in Korean, not because I lack the words, but because Korean, for the first time in my life, is not the right language for this. Korean is the language of my empire. Of my inheritance. Of every carefully constructed wall between myself and the world. I have a different language in mind. I rise from the armchair, no urgency, nothing abrupt, the way a man moves when he has made a decision and is at peace with the weight of it, and cross the 3 feet of pale carpet that have been, in their own quiet way, the longest distance of my adult life. I sit beside her on the sofa. Not the polished distance of a business arrangement. Beside her. The way you sit beside a person when the performance is finally over. I reach out. My right hand, the one marked from wrist to knuckle with ink she cannot yet read, settles over hers on the microphone. Not a grip. Not a command. A request. My thumb traces once across her knuckles, and she lets me take the instrument from her hands. I set it on the table and reach forward and click it off. In the warm, still light of a room we now share like a held breath, I lean toward her and speak. My English is perfect. Unaccented. Unhurried. It has always been. I don't want you to translate, I say. I want you to feel. She goes very still. Outside, Seoul continues to be itself, enormous and indifferent and lit like a fever dream 17 floors below us. Inside, the world has contracted to the space between 2 people on a gray sofa, the ghost of my thumb still warm across her knuckles, and the soft, catastrophic knowledge that neither of us is going back to what this had been before.
But to understand how I ended up on a gray sofa in the Seoul sky, speaking a word I hadn't meant to say to a man who has never once meant to be understood. You have to go back. Not far. 7 weeks. A Tuesday morning in a glass and steel office in Uido, when my translation firm sent me a contract and a briefing document and a name I had to look up, because I hadn't known it was possible to be the most powerful man in a city without anyone saying your name at full volume. You have to go back to the beginning of Jaehwi Lee, and the beginning of me, and the improbable, consequential fact that 3,000 miles from my father's Itaewon, his voice found me first. I just didn't know it yet. He has understood every word. That is the first thought that arrives. Not gracefully, it arrives the way cold water does, sudden and total, reaching every part of me at once. 7 weeks of muttered frustrations in the back of his car. 7 weeks of thinking out loud in the elevator, in the corridor, in the 30 seconds between floors when I believed I was alone with my own language. 7 weeks of English functioning as a private room I did not know he had a key to. I stand up from the sofa. I don't decide to, my body simply refuses to remain seated in the ruins of my composure. How long, I say. It is not quite a question. It has no softness in it. He doesn't pretend not to understand what I'm asking. That, at least, is something. Always, he says. The word is quiet. It lands like a full stop at the end of a sentence I have been writing for 7 weeks without knowing it. I pick up my bag. I pick up the microphone, the one he clicked off, the one that now feels like evidence, and I walk to the door with the particular dignity of a woman who will fall apart later, privately, in a language nobody else speaks. Georgia. I stop. His voice in English is different from his voice in Korean. Korean is controlled, architectural, every syllable load-bearing. English, in his mouth, is quieter. More exposed. Like a room with the furniture removed. I do not turn around. My car, he says. 10 minutes. I will explain. I leave without answering. Which is, I suppose, its own kind of yes. I do not go straight to the car. I go to the river. There is a section of the Han River embankment near Mapo Bridge where an elderly man named Daeung sells roasted chestnuts from a cart that has not changed in 30 years. He speaks a dialect from the South Jeolla province that is slowly disappearing, the vowels elongated and warm, the rhythm unhurried, carrying in it the particular music of a Korea that the glass towers of Gangnam have been quietly swallowing for decades. I have been recording him for 4 months. He thinks I am writing a paper. I sit on the stone embankment and I do not record anything. I just listen to the city. Seoul in the late afternoon is a sound collage, construction and pop music and the particular hush of the Han moving underneath everything like a thought the city is trying to keep to itself. Language, I have always believed, is not just what we say. It is the shape of what we cannot bring ourselves to say. The dialect of silence. The grammar of the things we perform instead of feel. I have built my entire career on hearing what other people leave out. It has apparently taken me 7 weeks to notice I was sitting next to someone doing exactly the same thing to me. I close my eyes. I think about his thumb on my knuckles. I think about I want you to feel. 10 minutes, he said. I am already walking back.
She gets into the car without looking at me. The partition between us and the driver rises. Seoul moves past the tinted glass, blurred and golden in the late afternoon, a city that does not slow down for anyone's private catastrophe. I choose my words with care. I have been choosing them, in the wrong language, for 7 weeks. Gyeongbokgung Palace. I begin. 18 months ago. I go once a year. Alone. I pause. I rented the English audio guide. She turns her head. I can see the exact moment she understands where this is going. Something shifts behind her eyes, a recalibration. The narration, I say. The section on the Western Palace Gate. The way you described what it felt like to stand where so many people had stood, carrying things they could not put down. I look at her directly. I stood there for 11 minutes. I listened to you say that grief and hope sound the same in old stone. I listened to it 4 times. The city moves past us. I used every resource I have to find the woman behind that voice. I hold her gaze. It took 9 days. You were not easy to find. You hunted me down, she says. Not an accusation. Something more complicated than that. I found you, I say quietly. There is a difference. She looks away, out at Seoul. I'm not sure there is, she says. The car moves through the city. Neither of us speaks again for a very long time. But she does not ask him to stop.
3 weeks after the car ride, Jaehwi Lee holds a press conference. I watch it from the back of the room the way I watch everything, at a careful distance, microphone off, notepad open, existing in the professional negative space that interpreters learn to occupy. Invisible by design. Useful by proximity. He is extraordinary at it. The charcoal suit is the same. The stillness is the same. But something has been repositioned, the way a painting looks different depending on which room you hang it in. He stands at the podium of the COEX Grand Ballroom and announces the formal restructuring of his holdings into a legitimate real estate and logistics corporation, and the room, packed with journalists, investors, and the particular species of person who attends events like this purely to watch things shift, leans forward as one body. I have watched powerful men perform legitimacy before. It usually looks exactly like what it is. This does not. This looks like a man who has decided something. Not for the cameras. For himself. I write nothing in my notepad. I am watching his hands. Still. Controlled. The ink at his wrist just visible beneath the cuff of his shirt, ancient script that I now know is not what anyone in this room believes it to be. The cameras go off like a weather system. And then one of them turns toward me. I do not see the photographer. I see the flash first, white and indiscriminate, and then I hear someone say my name. Not the interpreter. My name. Which means someone has done research, which means this is not accidental, which means I have approximately 4 seconds before this becomes something I cannot walk away from quietly. I am already reaching for my bag when Kong, Jaehwi's head of security, materializes at my elbow. Mr. Lee requests your presence, he says, which in Kang's particular dialect means, move now, questions later. I move. The service corridor behind the ballroom is stark and fluorescent after the warm theater of the press room. I follow Kong through 2 fire doors and down a stairwell that smells of concrete and electrical wiring, and then we are outside, not the grand front entrance with its valet stands and camera line, but a narrow side street in the machinery of Gangnam, where a black vehicle is already idling. Jaehwi is already inside. He has loosened his tie exactly 1 inch. For him, that is the equivalent of a collapse.
The photographers breached the vehicle cordon at the corner of Tehran RO in 40 seconds, faster than my team anticipated, which means someone fed them the route. I make 2 calls. I say very little. The car changes direction. Georgia sits beside me and says nothing, which I have come to understand is not passivity, it is her processing. She is somewhere inside her own mind, running calculations I am not permitted to see, and I have learned in the past 3 weeks not to interrupt her when she goes there. The car is not going to be enough. We're getting out, I say. She looks at me. Here? Here is the neon corridor of Gangnam on a Friday evening, every surface lit, every pavement crowded, the air thick with food stalls and music and the particular urban energy of 10,000 people who have somewhere to be. The worst possible environment for a man whose face is currently on every news alert in the city. Which makes it, by a certain logic, the best. Stay close, I say, and open the door.
He takes my hand in the crowd and I tell myself it is operational. It is not operational. We move fast, not running, because running announces itself, but the purposeful urgent stride of 2 people with somewhere to be, and Gangnam swallows us the way cities swallow individuals when you stop performing and start moving. He knows where he is going. He steers us left at a Pojamika tent, right through a covered arcade smelling of fried dough and phone cases, down a stairwell I would never have noticed, and through a door that opens, after a key code I don't see him enter, into silence. A safe house. Small, plain, aggressively ordinary. He releases my hand. Neither of us speaks. The city is muffled behind the walls. My pulse is not. I am aware of several things simultaneously, the smallness of the room, the proximity of him, the fact that my professional vocabulary has no word for the specific quality of this silence, and the further fact that I am no longer certain I want one. He turns to look at me. You're safe, he says. And because I have spent my entire career listening for the thing underneath the words, I hear, very clearly, what he does not say. I would not have let anything happen to you. The neon city pulses somewhere beyond the walls. Neither of us moves toward the door. The safe house has 1 lamp. It throws a warm, narrow light across the room, enough to see by, not enough to hide in, and we have been sitting in it for 20 minutes, waiting for Kang's confirmation that the photographers have dispersed. Jaehwi is at the small table with his phone face down, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. I am on the single chair across from him with my knees together and my recorder in my lap, not recording anything. I am looking at his hands. I have been trying not to do this for weeks. In the controlled environment of the negotiating suite, with a conference table between us and a room full of witnesses, it was manageable. Here, in a space roughly the size of my first Seoul apartment, with one lamp and no performance left to hide behind, I look. The ink runs from the base of his fingers to somewhere beneath his rolled sleeve, dense and deliberate, not decorative. The script is archaic, the characters stacked in vertical columns, the strokes fine enough that they read as texture before they read as language. At his neck, visible now without the buttoned collar, the same script continues its climb. I know what everyone says it means. I have heard the rumors that interpreters collect like weather reports, syndicate rank, kill count, debt markers, loyalty oaths written on skin so they cannot be surrendered. I believe, sitting here in the lamplight, almost none of it. The script is too careful. Whatever this is, it was written by someone who loved the language it came from. You're reading it, he says. Not a question. Trying to, I say. The script is old. Pre-modern. I can recognize maybe a third of the characters. A pause. Something moves across his face, not quite decision, not quite surrender. Something between. Ask me, he says.
Nobody has ever asked? That is the truth I have carried for 11 years. The ink has been visible, the assumptions have been loud, and nobody, not one person in my entire world, has looked at my hands with that particular expression she is wearing now. Not fear. Not fascination. Something more dangerous than either. Comprehension, moving toward the correct answer before I have given it. I turn my right hand over on the table between us. An offering. An exposure. I am not certain I have the vocabulary in any language for what it costs me to do it. She reaches out. Her fingers settle on my wrist, light, professional, the way she handles her microphone, and then they change into something else. Something slower. Sijo, I say. Ancient Korean verse form. 3 lines. Each line carries a particular emotional weight. The first establishes the world, the second disrupts it, the third resolves into something the first line could not have anticipated. She is tracing the first column with one fingertip. I feel it the way you feel a sound in a room that has been silent too long. My mother wrote poetry, I say. Not professionally. In notebooks she kept in the kitchen drawer, under the household accounts, where my father would not look. I pause. She died when I was 19. Lung cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. I look at the ink rather than at Georgia. I had her last 3 poems tattooed in the script she used. The archaic form. Because she said modern Korean had lost something, that the old script held grief differently. More honestly, Georgia has gone very still. The rest, I say, is a promise I made at her funeral. Written in the same hand as hers so they would be kept company. I finally look up. I have not yet finished keeping it.
I am a woman who works in language professionally. I have more words than most people. I have words in 7 languages for dozens of gradations of feeling. I have nothing for this. I look down at his hand in mine, the hand that the tabloids have called a weapon, that the industry whispers have called evidence, that I myself, 7 weeks ago, catalogued as a reason to maintain professional distance, and I understand, with the particular clarity that arrives not in the mind but somewhere lower, more honest, that I have been reading the wrong translation. This is not a man who chose violence as a language. This is a man who has been trying, in the only dialect available to him, to find his way back to his mother's kitchen drawer. Read me one, I say quietly. The first one. Translate it for me. He is silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice stripped of every layer of authority he has spent 34 years constructing, Jaehwi Lee translates his dead mother's poetry into English for a woman he found by her voice in a palace courtyard. The lamp throws its narrow light. Outside, Seoul rages on, enormous and indifferent. In here, two people fluent in the languages of concealment sit in the lamplight and, for the first time, say exactly what they mean. The COEX Convention Center holds 3,000 people when it is full. Today it is full. I sit at the interpreter's station to the left of the main stage, a small desk, a microphone, a earpiece, a glass of water I have not touched. The simultaneous interpretation setup means I am feeding English in real time to the international press contingent, my voice running just beneath the surface of the event like a current nobody sees but everybody depends on. This is my most invisible configuration. A voice without a body. A meaning without a source. Jaehwi stands at the podium in charcoal and white, fielding questions with the controlled economy of a man who has decided, permanently and at considerable personal cost, to do this differently. 3 weeks since the Gangnam chase. 3 weeks since the safe house and the lamplight and his mother's poetry in my hands. I have not touched him since. We have not discussed it. We are, by unspoken and mutual agreement, pretending that the distance between an interpreter's desk and a podium is a sufficient substitute for the distance we no longer actually have. It is not. But it is what we have, so we use it. The questions are going well, too well, I think, which is the particular anxiety of someone who has spent 6 years knowing that rooms like this only feel safe in the 30 seconds before they aren't. Then Park Sung-jin stands up. I know him by reputation. Everyone in this industry does. A rival conglomerate head with the particular brand of cruelty that wears a press pass, he does not attack businesses, he attacks the people inside them, and he does it in public, with a smile, so that the wound looks like a question. He takes the microphone from the floor moderator and says, in Korean, very pleasantly, Mr. Lee, the Korean public has a long memory. My question is simply this. When a man has spent 15 years building an empire on methods this room would prefer not to name, what exactly are we legitimizing today? The corporation, or the criminal? 3,000 people. Dead silence. I feel rather than see Jaehwi go still at the podium. Not his professional stillness, something older and colder than that. The stillness of a man who has kept something locked for a very long time and has just heard the lock mechanism engage in the wrong direction. He speaks. 8 words in Korean. Measured. Quiet. Absolutely devastating. Directly translated, what he says would empty this room, collapse the stock offering, and hand Park Sung-jin exactly the narrative he came here to build. My finger is on the microphone button. I have approximately 2 seconds. I make the choice before I have fully made it, the way you catch something falling before you decide to reach. My voice goes out across the English press bank, smooth and unbroken. Mr. Lee appreciates the question and welcomes the opportunity to let the corporation's results speak more eloquently than its history. The work of legitimacy is demonstrated, not declared, and this company intends to demonstrate it. A beat of silence. Then the room exhales, and someone in the third row begins to applaud. Park Sung-jin sits down. Jaehwi does not look at me. He doesn't need to. I can feel, from 20 feet away, that he heard every word of both versions.
I wait until the room has emptied. I wait until Kong has cleared the corridor, and the catering staff have gone, and the only sound is the ventilation system doing its indifferent work above us. Then I walk to the interpreter's station where Georgia is packing her equipment with the focused deliberateness of a person who knows a conversation is coming and is buying herself 30 additional seconds. Don't, she says before I speak. You altered my words. I saved your empire. That is not your decision to make. She sets the microphone down on the desk and turns to face me, and I see it clearly, the thing she has been carrying since the moment she made the choice. Not regret. Something more complicated. The look of a person who did the right thing and knows it cost them something they cannot get back. I have one professional absolute, she says. 1. I do not alter, omit, or improve. I translate. Exactly and completely. That is the only thing in 6 years I have never broken. Her voice is steady in the way that things are steady just before they are not. I broke it for you. Tonight. In front of 3,000 people and an international press feed. I did not ask you to. No, she says. You didn't. The silence between us is different from the safe house silence. That one was full of things moving toward each other. This one is full of something more difficult, the specific weight of a gift the recipient had no say in receiving. You made me something to be protected, I say, more quietly. I have spent my entire life ensuring nobody does that. She looks at me for a long moment. I know, she says. Welcome to how it feels. She picks up her bag and walks out. I stand in the empty hall of the COX Convention Center and understand, with unwelcome clarity, that Georgia Simon has just done to me exactly what I did to her in a palace courtyard 18 months ago. She found something in me before I gave her permission to look.
I take a week. I do not contact Jaehwi. I do not respond to Kang's professionally worded messages, which I have come to recognize as Jaehwi's messages with the urgency filed down. I return to my apartment in Mapo, small, deliberately sparse, the apartment of a woman who did not intend to stay long, and I sit with the thing I did at the COEX Convention Center until it stops feeling like a wound and starts feeling like information. What the information tells me is this: I am no longer a professional in his orbit. I am something else. Something without a clean job title or an ethics clause. Something that makes decisions with the chest instead of the mind, and rewrites the truth to protect a man whose hands carry his dead mother's poetry and whose empire was built on methods this room would prefer not to name. I need to remember why I came to Seoul. I take the subway to Itaewon on a Tuesday morning, when the neighborhood is quiet, before the restaurants open, before the evening crowd assembles, when the streets return briefly to the people who actually live in them. I have been here before, in the early weeks, before Jaehwi consumed the available oxygen of my attention. I know the block. I have stood in front of the building that used to be my father's and noted, with the flat effect of someone who has had 20 years to practice, that it is now a logistics company's regional office. A logistics company. The particular irony of that has never fully landed until this moment. I go to the district archive office. I have a researcher's credential and a specific request: all commercial property transfer records for this block, filed between 2001 and 2006. The clerk is young and efficient and has no idea what she is handing me. I take the folder to a window table in a cafe across the street and I open it. My father's name is on the third page. Simon, Robert A., commercial lease, Itaewon-dong. The business he built over 11 years in Seoul, an import brokerage that specialized in connecting American goods with Korean distributors, built on relationships he spent a decade cultivating, the thing he loved most after my mother and me, the reason he stayed in this city long after the marriage ended and I went back to the States with her. I know the shape of what happened. I have always known the shape. Bankruptcy. A forced sale. The kind of financial pressure that leaves no visible fingerprints and enormous damage. My father came home to Georgia, the state, not me, though I have never been able to think of the name without feeling the overlap, and he was quieter than he had been, and then he was sick, and then he was gone. I was 23. I told myself the two things were unconnected. I told myself that for a long time. The acquiring entity is listed on page 7. I read the name 3 times before my vision fully clears. Jaehwi Holdings, predecessor entity. Authorized signatory, Lee Byung-chul. Lee Byung-chul. Who was, the former head of the syndicate. Who died 6 years ago of a stroke in a private hospital in Gangnam, leaving his empire and his methods and his 34-year-old son to decide what to do with both. Who was, Jaehwi's father. I sit in the cafe for a long time. The street outside moves at its ordinary pace, delivery scooters, a woman walking a very small dog, 2 tourists consulting a paper map with the particular bewilderment of people who did not expect the city to be this large. Seoul does not slow down for anyone's private catastrophe. I have noted this before. I note it again now, because noting things is what I do when I cannot feel them yet. My father's business. Forcefully taken. His life's work extracted from him by a man whose son I have been protecting with my voice, my ethics, my professional absolute, the one thing in 6 years I had never broken. I broke it for the heir to the empire that broke my father. The folder is still open on the table. My father's name in bureaucratic font, small and permanent and entirely unaware of what it is sitting next to. I think about the safe house. The lamplight. His mother's poetry beneath my fingertip. I think about I found you. There is a difference. I think about my father coming home quiet. The thing about being fluent in the language of what people leave unspoken is that you cannot unhear it once it has been said. The silence of this document is deafening. It says, the man you are falling in love with was built, at least in part, from the rubble of your father's life. It says, some things do not survive translation. I close the folder. I place my hand flat on top of it, the way Jaehwi places his hand flat on a table when he is deciding something. Then I take out my phone and I do not call him. I sit with the truth the way you sit with a language you are still learning, slowly, without the comfort of fluency, aware that understanding it will cost you something you cannot name in advance. Outside, Itaewon carries on. My father's building stands at the end of the block, housing someone else's empire. I do not look away from it. I find out the way everyone finds out about everything in this city. My phone. I am still in Itaewon, still at the cafe table, still with my hand flat on the folder containing my father's name and the name of the man who took everything from him, when the notification arrives. A Korean entertainment news aggregator I downloaded 3 months ago to monitor press coverage of Jaehwi's legitimate pivot, a professional tool, I told myself, purely professional, lights up my screen with a photograph. Jaehwi. A restaurant I recognize as Gwangjangdong's most private members' dining room, the kind of place that does not appear on any public list and requires a particular species of connection to enter. He is in his charcoal suit. He is leaning slightly forward across the table in the way he leans when he is giving someone his full attention, which I know intimately and against my better judgment, is not something he gives easily or often. Across from him, a woman. Immaculate. The particular elegance of someone who was dressed by other people from birth. The caption identifies her as Shin Yuna, only daughter of Shin Byung-mo, chairman of Shinhan Allied Group, one of the 4 largest Chaebol conglomerates in South Korea. The second notification arrives before I have finished processing the first. Exclusive, Lee Jaehwi and Shin Yuna, merger of empires? Sources confirm arranged marriage discussions underway. I set my phone face down on the folder containing my father's name. For a moment the cafe is very quiet. By evening it is everywhere. I walk back to the subway through Itaewon and the story follows me, on the screen of a street-facing television outside an electronics store, on the phones of 2 women waiting at the crosswalk, scrolling with the focused urgency of people consuming something that confirms what they already believed. Of course, the most powerful newly legitimate businessman in Seoul would consolidate with one of the oldest Chaebol families. Of course the arranged marriage is strategic. Of course there is a woman already selected, already positioned, already appropriate in every way that Georgia Simon, Black American linguist and audio archivist currently unraveling in a Mapo apartment, is not. The coverage is thorough. It has the velocity of a story that has been prepared in advance, waiting only for the right moment to release. Sources close to both families. Asset merger projections. A timeline suggesting the arrangement has been in discussion for months. 7 weeks ago I was sitting in his car and he was telling me he had spent 9 days finding me. That there is a difference between finding and hunting. I wonder, on the Itaewon subway platform, how many other things he has been finding simultaneously. How many other arrangements he has been running in parallel beneath the charcoal suit and the careful English and the mother's poetry that I was foolish enough to touch. I am fluent in the language of what people leave unspoken. I should have been listening more carefully. I do not cry on the subway. I am not built for public grief. I wait until I am inside my apartment with the door closed, and then I do not cry either, because somewhere between Itaewon and Mapo the grief has already metabolized into something harder and more useful. The specific clarity that arrives when you have been foolish in a way you cannot entirely blame on anyone but yourself. I sit on the edge of my bed and I build the case methodically, the way I was trained: evidence first, interpretation second, conclusion last. Evidence: his father destroyed mine. The foundation of everything he inherited was laid, in part, on the rubble of my father's work and the quiet devastation that followed him home. Evidence: while I have been translating his threats and protecting his empire and letting him take a microphone from my hands in a sunlit room, there has been another woman in a private dining room. A woman selected for reasons that have nothing to do with voices in palace courtyards. Evidence: I broke the one professional absolute I have kept for 6 years. For a man who was, at best, conducting 2 negotiations simultaneously. At worst, something I do not have the language for yet, and do not want to develop. Conclusion: I was a temporary arrangement in a life that had permanent arrangements already in place. I was a dialect he was curious about. Something to be recorded and archived and ultimately set aside when the serious business of his world resumed. I know what that feels like. My father knew what that felt like. I stand up. I get my suitcase from the top of the wardrobe. I do not pack it yet. I simply place it open on the floor, the way you place a decision before you have fully made it, visible, ready, waiting for the part of you that is still arguing to finish and sit down. My phone lights up on the bed. His name on the screen. I turn it face down. Some things, I have learned, do not require translation. The silence says everything. I wear the light blue blouse. I tell myself it is coincidental, the first thing I reached for, nothing more. But I have spent my career studying the unconscious grammar of human behavior, and I know, somewhere below the level of admission, that I chose it deliberately. This is the blouse I was wearing the first day. The day before any of this became what it became. I am going back to the beginning, dressed for it. Jaehwi's corporate offices occupy 4 floors of a glass tower in Uido. I have been here many times. I know the lobby security by name. I know which elevator bank runs faster, which conference rooms have the best acoustics, which assistant, the quiet one, second desk from the left, actually controls his schedule. I take the faster elevator. I do not sign in. Nobody stops me, which tells me everything I need to know about how thoroughly I have become a fixture in the architecture of his professional world. That ends today. He is at his desk when I enter. No jacket, sleeves rolled, the ink at his wrists visible in the late morning light. He looks up and something moves across his face, relief, immediately complicated by the expression I am wearing. I place my resignation letter on his desk. 1 page. Professionally formatted. Signed. Georgia. I'm not here to discuss it, I say. I'm here to deliver it in person because you deserve that. And then I'm leaving.
I do not touch the letter. I look at it, her name at the bottom, her signature precise and final as a door closing, and I make a decision. I stand up. I come around the desk, not toward her, just into the same plane of the room, because she is already positioned near the door, and I will not corner her. The dinner was a dissolution, I say. I was terminating the merger discussion. The Chaebol arrangement was my father's design, not mine. I have been unwinding it for 4 months. I know what the photographs look like. Then let me explain what they are. Jaehwi. My name in her mouth, for the first time, and it is a warning rather than a softening. I went to Itaewon. The room changes. I go still in the way I go still when something I have been bracing for has finally arrived, not surprise, but the particular gravity of a thing already in motion reaching its destination. I went to the district archive. She continues. I pulled the property transfer records from 2001 to 2006. Her voice is level. Trained. The voice she uses when she is translating something difficult, and will not allow it to touch her until the room is empty. Your father's name is on the acquisition documents for my father's business. Lee Byung-chul. Authorized signatory. I say nothing. His business, she says, and for the first time the level voice splinters, very slightly, at the edge of the word. 11 years. Gone. And my father came home and he didn't. She stops. Reassembles. He died quiet. Did you know that? The kind of quiet that comes from having had something essential removed. I know, I say.
That stops me. You know. I found out 8 months ago, he says. When I began auditing my father's legacy acquisitions. There were many. I have been working to address them. He holds my gaze. Yours is on the list. It has been on the list. I want this to reach me the way it should. I want to stand here and allow it to be what it appears to be, a man quietly dismantling his father's wreckage, my father's name already on a list, already being addressed, already known. But I have spent 6 years translating the distance between what people say and what they have done, and the distance here is 20 years wide and filled with my father's silence, and I do not have the fluency for it. Not today. Not standing in this office in this blouse with a resignation letter on his desk and an open suitcase on my apartment floor. It's too much, I say. All of it. The dinner. Itaewon. The microphone at the COEX. I look at him, really look, the way I have been trying not to for weeks. I broke myself open for you. In ways I cannot put back together from here. Then let me. No. The word is quiet. Absolute. A door, not a wall. A door I am closing from the inside. I came here because you deserved the letter in person. Not because I'm available to be explained to. I pick up my bag. He does not move to stop me. He is a man who understands, at a fundamental level, the difference between holding on and holding someone against their will. I have always known this about him. It is one of the reasons this has been so impossible to leave. Georgia. His voice. That particular English, quiet, unguarded, the one without the empire in it. I stop at the door. I do not turn around. My father spoke in taking, he says. I am trying. I know what you're trying, I say. I just don't know if trying is enough. I walk out. The elevator is faster on the way down. I am back on the Uedo Street in 40 seconds, in the noise and the gray morning light, in a city that does not slow down for anyone's private catastrophe. My father's building is 4 subway stops away. My suitcase is open on my floor. And somewhere above me, in a glass tower in Uedo, there is a letter on a desk and a man who has not yet said everything he needed to say. I keep walking. I take the long way. My flight is at midnight. My suitcase is in a cab circling Anguk station, my recorder is in my bag with 4 months of Daeyoung's disappearing dialect on it, the last thing I archived before I stopped being able to think about language without thinking about him, and I have given myself 1 hour. 1 hour to walk through Bukshin Hanok village at twilight and say goodbye to the version of Seoul I actually loved, before I go back to being a woman who visited once and left clean. The village is quiet in this light. The traditional tiled rooftops catch the last of the sun and hold it, warm and amber, the color of something ending gracefully, and the narrow stone alleys run between the old houses like sentences in a language that has refused to modernize. I have recorded here too. The sound of this place at dusk is specific and irreplaceable, the distant city a low hum beneath the closer sounds of wooden gates and wind and the particular silence of a neighborhood that has survived everything Seoul has thrown at it. I walk slowly. My bag is heavy. My chest is heavier. I am thinking about my father, not the quiet version, the one who came home diminished, but the earlier one. The one who loved this city enough to stay. Who built something here, block by block and relationship by relationship, in a language that was never his first but that he learned with the particular devotion of someone who understood that fluency is a form of love. I am thinking that I understand him now in a way I did not before I came here. I round a corner into a narrower alley, the city skyline opening briefly at the end of it, Seoul in the evening, glass and light and scale, the old neighborhood and the new city holding each other in the same frame, and I stop. 3 black sedans are blocking the alley.
I leave the security in the cars. All of it, calm, the detail, the infrastructure of a life lived behind managed perimeters. I leave it running at the curb and I step into the alley alone, in the violet buckskin twilight, without the charcoal suit jacket, without the composed architecture of 34 years. Just me. What remains when everything else is removed? She is standing 10 meters away with her bag on her shoulder, and the Seoul skyline at her back, and she looks at me with an expression I have no clean translation for, fury and grief, and something underneath both that she is working very hard to keep below the surface. She has always worked hard. I have always noticed. I notice now, in this light, that it is costing her more than usual. Your flight is at midnight, I say. You had me followed. I had your cab tracked, I say. There is a difference. There isn't. But her voice, saying it, is less certain than the words.
Everything I have been carrying for 3 weeks comes up at once. You don't get to do this, I say. You don't get to block a road in the middle of the city and stand there looking like that and expect me to. I stop. Restart. I came to Seoul with one purpose. 1. To understand what happened to my father. And what I found is that the man I have spent 7 weeks, my voice fractures. I let it. I am done managing my fractures for an audience. The man I broke my professional ethics for. The man whose mother's poetry I held in my hands. His family is the reason my father came home and went quiet and never came back from it. Do you understand what I'm telling you? There is no version of this that translates. Our lives are written in languages that are fundamentally, permanently untranslatable, and I cannot. I run out of words. I, who have never run out of words, stand in a stone alley in Buckshin at twilight and find the well empty. Everything said. Nothing resolved. Jaehwi steps forward. He is holding a dossier. Thick, legal, bound with the particular formality of documents that have been signed in front of witnesses and cannot be undone. He holds it out. He does not speak. He lets it speak first. My hands are not steady when I open it. The first document is a property transfer deed. Iriwandong, the full address, I know it by heart. I have stood in front of it, I have placed my hand on the folder that contained its history, transferred in full to Simon, Georgia A. Notarized. Filed. Already processed. My father's building. In my name. The second document is a public dissolution notice. The Chaebol merger with Shinhan Allied Group, formally, legally, publicly terminated. The projected asset value of the dissolved arrangement is listed in the bottom corner. A number that requires, as I once said to myself in a ballroom, new vocabulary. He risked half his empire. The third document is the one that undoes me entirely. It is a letter, handwritten, on plain paper, not legal stationery, not corporate letterhead. His handwriting, which I recognize from the margins of briefing documents he has annotated in the past 7 weeks. Addressed to the Simon family estate. A formal acknowledgement of the acquisition conducted by Lee Byung-chul in 2003. An accounting of the harm. A commitment to full restitution. He signed it before I walked out of his office. Before he knew if I would ever read it.
She is crying. She will not thank me for noticing, so I simply step closer and say the thing I have been trying to find the architecture for since she walked out of my office and took the faster elevator down. My father spoke in taking, I say. It was the only language he knew. Everything he built, including me, was built in that dialect. I stop. The city is enormous and lit behind her, the old rooftops below the glass towers, the Han River somewhere beyond it all carrying its quiet thought. I have been trying to learn a different language for 6 years. I did not know what to call it until I heard your voice in a palace courtyard. She looks up at me. The dossier is pressed against her chest, her father's building in her hands, her eyes full of everything that does not have a word in any of the 7 languages she speaks. It is your language, I say. The one you use when you are not translating. When you are just feeling. I hold her gaze. I want to be fluent in it. I want to spend however long it takes to learn it properly. Jaehwi. My name in her mouth. Not a warning this time. I know the distance. I say. I know what my family's name costs you. I am not asking you to forget it. I am asking you to let me spend the rest of my life learning to say it differently. She closes the distance. Not me, her. She crosses the 3 feet of buckskin stone between us, and her free hand finds the front of my shirt, and she pulls me in with the particular desperation of someone who has finished arguing with something they have known for a long time, and I hold her the way I have been holding the words, carefully, completely, aware of the weight. We stay like that while the city lights come up beneath the darkening sky. When she finally pulls back enough to look at me, Seoul is fully lit. The old village and the glass towers and the river and all of it, enormous and indifferent and breathtakingly alive. I'm going to need my building back, she says. Her voice is unsteady. Her eyes are clear. It's already yours, I say. She kisses me again, softer this time. A beginning rather than a collision. Below us the city carries on, vast and luminous, speaking its 1,000 dialects all at once. We have finally found one of our own. No microphone. No contract. No translation required.